Shalom, welcome back. We're going to continue on with this answering the skeptics, the issues that people have with the testimony of Simon Kepha. We're moving on to objection number 5. This is actually one I heard several times within the last couple of weeks. And again, not everybody that brings this question forward is someone that's actually objecting to it. A lot of times it's just people saying, well, I believe what you're saying, but there's this one verse that I have an issue with or I don't understand. And so this is one that's brought forth frequently. And that is that Yeshua told this man to go to the temple and make sacrifices. And so the episode in question is where Yeshua heals this leper, and he tells the leper to go make the offering that Moshe commanded. And so you look up what is in the Pentateuch as the offering that Moshe commanded, and it's a sacrifice that involves slaughtering a couple of birds. But if you look at what's actually said in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is no mention of an actual sacrifice. He just says in Mark, which is generally thought to be the oldest testimony, offer for your cleansing what Moshe ordered. Matthew says offer the gift that Moshe commanded, which is the one that is most often translated as go make the sacrifice. But the word there is not sacrifice, it's gift. And then Luke really agrees with Mark. So Matthew, because it is the one that seems to be the most indicative of a sacrifice, we're going to focus in on it, and we're going to ask, okay, what is this word for gift that Moshe commanded? The Greek word is doron, which means a gift or gifts or something given or an offering. It doesn't actually mean sacrifice. In fact, in this episode in Luke 21, where Yeshua and his apostles are watching the people coming in to drop money into the treasury, the word there for their offering of money is the word doron. So it doesn't actually mean sacrifice. So Yeshua is saying, go and offer what it was that Moshe commanded. Now, we generally think that it's what is in the Pentateuch, but there's actually a different way to view this statement. So we're going to start off in the Nazarene Acts, and we're going to look at what Kepha had to say about the issue of Moshe commanding sacrifices. And so starting in the first of the Acts, chapter 36, it says, when in the meantime Moshe, the faithful and wise steward, perceived that the vice of sacrificing to idols had been deeply ingrained into the people from their association with the Mitzrayim, and that the roots of this evil could not be extracted from them, he allowed them sacrifices, but permitted it only to be done to Yeshua, that by any means he may cut off one half of the deeply ingrained evil, leaving the other half to be corrected by another at a future time. And of course, that other one that was supposed to correct it fully was Yeshua. So this is being written about right after the sacrifice to the golden calf. And in the process of this episode and his other association with the Israelites, Moshe understood that he couldn't get them to stop sacrificing to idols completely. So he said, okay, well, if I can't get them to stop sacrificing to idols, maybe I can just cut the idol out and have them just do sacrifices to Yahuwah instead of idols. This behavior, which Kepha says is a deeply rooted evil, Moshe corrected half of it with the intention of getting Yeshua to correct the other half, because Elohim had told him that he was going to raise up a prophet like unto him. Now, the homilies actually differs from the Nazarene Acts in that, according to Kepha, the sacrifices were added after the fact, not by Moshe, but by people that came after him. In Homilies 2, and I recommend reading all of Homilies 2 starting around chapter 30, because it does go into a lot more detail than I'm going to go into this video on this subject. But he said that the scriptures have joined to them many falsehoods against Elohim on this account. The prophet Moshe, having by the order of Elohim delivered the law with the explanations to certain chosen men, some 70 in number, in order that they might also instruct such of the people as they chose, after a little while the written Torah, or law, had added to it certain falsehoods contrary to the law of Elohim. And he goes on to say that this was allowed to take place as a test And the point of the test is this, that you're in a greater danger of believing things that are written against Elohim than you are in rejecting the things that are written because they paint Yahuwah in a negative light. And again, I recommend reading the entire chapter or the entire homily number 2 just to get the full concept of all of this. So why would there be a discrepancy? Why would Kepha say in the homilies that there are false chapters added or false verses added versus in the recognitions where it would say that Moshe allowed it? And I believe that we've got somewhat of the answer here in homily 2, where he says that Simon Magus intends to come into public and to speak of those chapters against Elohim that are added to the Scripture for the sake of temptation, that he may seduce as many wretched ones as he can from the love of Elohim. For we do not wish to say in public that these chapters are added to the Bible, since we should thereby perplex the unlearned multitudes, and so accomplish the purpose of this wicked Simon. For they, not having yet the power of discerning, would flee from us as impious, or as if not only the blasphemous chapters were false, they would even withdraw from the word. Wherefore, we are under a necessity of assenting to the false chapters and putting questions in return to him concerning them, to draw him into a strait, and to give in private an explanation of the chapters that are spoken against Elohim to the well-disposed after a trial of their faith. And of this there is but one way, and that is a brief one, and it is this. And so he goes on to explain what their strategy is for dealing with this sort of thing. Before we move on to that, I want to pause here for a minute. So notice that Simon, in his act of impiety, is going to try and use the Bible against Kepha, which is really essentially using the Bible against Elohim himself. And the reason is this, is that Simon Magus knows that Kepha can't just come out in public and say, well, these chapters are added. And I go through the same experience myself sometimes, that when you're in a certain group of people that are on a particular level of understanding, you can't say that the Bible is false or that there's false things added into it, rather, because people will call you a heretic and they will get upset and say that you're impious because you refuse to believe these things against Elohim, like things that say that he creates evil, or that he's a bloodthirsty God demanding sacrifices, or things like that. On one hand, he's hoping to cause people to defend these scriptures. Simon Magus, that is hoping that people will fight to defend these scriptures. Or, if they do believe Kepha's testimony, that they will reject the scriptures altogether. And that's what I hear a lot, is that people are like, well, maybe we shouldn't believe anything. When in reality, this here, which is underlined, that you need the power of discerning. And so when, like, I will get accused a lot of times of just picking and choosing the scriptures I like. And that's not the case. By the very definition, discerning is picking and choosing. It's discerning what's true and what's false. So, yes, you do have to pick and choose. But it's not based upon what I like. It's based upon what Yeshua, by the testimony of Kepha, said was true and false. See, I'm not basing it on what I like. I'm basing it upon what Kepha's saying, what Yeshua said, and then also that actually lines up with what the prophets say. This is maybe the explanation for the reason that there's a discrepancy between the homilies and the recognitions. Maybe the recognitions was more of a public document or something that they would distribute more widely than the homilies, and so the homilies was kind of the insider information. Like, even though we're saying that this stuff was added, in reality, it wasn't added by Moshe, it was added by somebody else. But the point behind it all is the same, which is that Elohim never commanded it, whether Moshe added it or whether someone else did. Moving on in the homilies, second homilies starting around 39, Kepha gives us some advice on how to discern what is true and what is false. He says, everything that is spoken or written against Elohim is false. But in the discussion, you will even wonder how impious men, overlooking the multitudes of things that are spoken in the scriptures for Elohim, and looking at those that are spoken against him, gladly bring these forward. And thus the hearers, by reason of ignorance, believing the things against Elohim, become outcast from his kingdom. So I'm occasionally asked the question, is this a salvation issue? And my answer has always been, everything is a salvation issue. That's what I believed. I believe that the way you lived your life, the way that you walked out your walk, whatever that is everything is a salvation issue. And according to Kepha, he says that believing the things against Elohim will cause you to become an outcast from his kingdom. Now, this isn't me speaking. This is what Kepha said. And he gives us several examples. Actually, I believe it's 4 or 5 chapters worth of examples of things that are written against Elohim. But the one that really applies to the scope of this particular presentation is that Kepha says, if he is fond of fat and sacrifices and offerings and drink offerings, who then is without need, and who is holy and pure and perfect? And if you think about it, if you believed the way that the Torah presents Yeshua as this God that desires bloodshed, that loves the smell of burning flesh, does that sound like the type of God you would want to serve? Does that sound like a creator God or a destroyer God? Does that sound like the God of the living or the God of death? I mean, there's a lot of correlations you can make, and some people will say, well, that's not really fair, but I mean, it is. What type of God did Yeshua preach? A life-giving God or a God that desired death and destruction and bloodshed? Of course, it's a rhetorical question. Anyone that's asked that will say that he preached the God of the living. So anything written applying to sacrifices is something written against Elohim, and it's false. And in fact, Kepha even uses specifically sacrifices as being one of the falsehoods in Scripture. Not that was put in there by Moshe, but that was put in there by men after Moshe. So in that way, it differs from the recognitions. And I believe it has to do with the audience, tailoring the message for the audience. And that the truth is that they were added by men later, but the explanation that's given to those who are 100% initiated into this understanding is that Moshe just allowed them for a time. So what do the prophets in the Tanakh, what do they say about this? But Jeremiah 8:7, my people do not know the right ruling of Yeshua. How do you say we are wise and the Torah is with us? But look, the false pen of the scribe has worked falsehood. Now, I've heard different interpretations of this verse where people will try to deny what it's actually saying here. I've had somebody tell me that what I didn't understand is that this false pen of the scribe is actually talking about the oral teachings that the scribes were given, that they were teaching the people orally things that were in opposition to the Torah. But that's not actually what it says. Well, first of all, you don't use a pen to speak orally, but also it specifically mentions the Torah. It doesn't say the teachings of the scribes and the Pharisees. It says the Torah. So what specifically were these falsehoods? Well, if you scroll back a little bit in Jeremiah 7:22, I did not speak to your fathers or command them in the day I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim about matters of burnt offerings and slaughterings. But this word I did command them, saying, obey my voice, and I shall be your Elohim, and you shall be my people, and walk in the ways that I have commanded you, so that it will be well with you. So he's saying that the people have forsaken this Torah. The same prophet says that Yeshua is saying that he did not command sacrifices. And so then we go past this verse in question about the Torah being corrupted. Jeremiah 9:13, and Yeshua said, because they have forsaken my Torah, which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, nor walked according to it. But they have walked according to the stubbornness of their own hearts, after the Baals which their fathers had taught them. There's a really good book that I found at a used bookstore. The name of it is Moses and the Original Torah. And you can find this on Amazon. I believe it's out of print now. It's written by a Jewish man, and he is looking at the testimony of the prophets much the same way we are, and he's come to the same conclusion that I have, which is that the sacrifices were never part of the original Torah. They were added after the fact. And so this gentleman, Abba Hillel Silver, who wrote this book, he said in chapter 2, which is on page 8, this quote, it says, the elaborate sacrificial system which is found in the Pentateuch was undoubtedly developed later under Canaanite influence. In some instances, the very names of the sacrifices appropriated from them. So the Israelites took this sacrificial system, the worship of Baal, which you see mentioned in verse 14, and adopted them as practices in the worship of Yeshua. And most scholars that study the archaeology from the Canaanite and Hittite empires, they'll tell you the same thing, that these sacrifices in the Torah were just taken straight out of paganism. The only thing that was changed was that the name of Baal was changed to Yahuwah. And it's not just Jeremiah, but we can look in Isaiah, chapter 1, of what use to me are your many slaughterings, declares Yahuwah. I've had enough of the burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or lambs or goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand? So he's asking a rhetorical question. Who has required this from your hand to trample my courtyards? Well, I guess the obvious answer would be Moshe did, but Yahuwah's denying it. Stop bringing futile offerings. The stench of the smoke is an abomination to me. New months, Sabbaths, the calling of meetings. I'm unable to bear unrighteousness in assembly. And you may listen and say, well, wait a minute. No, the Torah of Elohim says that we are to make sacrifices. Well, if we go back just one verse, in verse 10, it says, hear the word of Yahuwah, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the Torah of our Elohim, you people of Gomorrah. According to Isaiah 1:10, the Torah of Elohim does not include what comes in the verses after it. So he's telling the people to listen to the Torah of Elohim and to quit making sacrifices, which these concepts, the way that Isaiah is describing, are mutually exclusive. When you spread out your hands, I hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I do not hear. Your hands have become filled with blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Stop doing evil. So Yahuwah is saying he's not going to listen to their prayers because their hands are filled with blood. It does not sound to me like these sacrifices were ordained by Moshe. And we can go to the end of Isaiah 66:3. But whoever slaughters a bull slays a man. Whoever slaughters a lamb breaks the dog's neck. Whoever brings a grain offering, pig's blood. Whoever burns incense blesses an idol. So you can see what these actions that we're told in the Torah is the desire of Elohim. And Elohim is saying, no, killing a bull is the same as slaying a man. Whoever slaughters a lamb is like breaking a dog's neck. It's no different than offering a dog on the idol, or pig's blood, or blessing an idol. It's all an abomination to him. And he goes on to quote this verse that many Messianics will quote when it comes to not keeping the Torah, but they don't seem to understand the first part of verse 3. It says, indeed they have chosen their own ways, and their being delights in their abominations. I shall also choose their punishments and bring their fears upon them, because I called and no one answered. I spoke and they did not hear. And they did evil before my eyes and chose what was displeasing to me. We can go on, even the minor prophets. They all agree with Isaiah and Jeremiah. Amos 5:25, did you bring me sacrifices and offerings during the 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? Another rhetorical question. Now, the fact that Amos wrote this and put this in his book, to me indicates that the people understood that there was a Torah written by Moshe that did not include sacrifices. Now, granted, Amos was written back before the destruction of the first temple. But back then, people understood that there was a Torah from Moses that did not include sacrifices. He goes on to say, you took up Sekuth, your king, and Kiyun, your star god, your images that you made for yourselves. And I will send you into exile beyond Damascus, says Yahuwah, whose name is the Elohim of hosts. Again, in the same way that Jeremiah and Isaiah start off by telling the people to turn back to the Torah, Amos is the same way. He starts off his prophetic book by stating about Yehudah, they have rejected the Torah of Elohim. Now, wait a minute. He's saying that they're rejecting the Torah of Elohim, and yet he's criticizing them for making sacrifices. So really, the only reasonable conclusion to come to is that the Torah originally given to Moshe did not include sacrifices. And in fact, if we look at the Panarion, the Panarion is a book written by Epiphanius, who was a Catholic bishop in the 4th century, and so he is writing what's called a heresiology. And heresiologies, they were very popular back in the 3rd and 4th century, and essentially what they are is a list of different heresies. The writer, who typically tends to be an Orthodox Christian Catholic priest of some sort, will then dispel each one of these heresies and tell you exactly why they're heresies and why you shouldn't accept them. And in the Panarion, which means medicine chest, and because it's a cure for every heresy, he writes about the original Jewish Christian believers, who are, as I mentioned before, are known as Ebionites or Nazareans. And he says about the Ebionites that they don't accept Moses' Pentateuch in its entirety, and that they reject certain sayings, which sounds exactly what Kepha's teaching. And also of the Nazareans, he said that they would not accept the Pentateuch, but rather they acknowledged Moshe and believed that he had received legislation, just not this legislation, they said, but some other. So in the same way that Kepha was saying that the Torah had been corrupted, that's basically what the Nazarene Ebionites believed. Also in the homilies, homily number 3, chapters 51 through 52, Kepha says, "And his saying, the heaven and the earth will pass away, but not one least letter of the punctuation will pass from the Torah," intimated that the things which pass away before the heavens and the earth do so do not belong to the Torah in the first place. Since then, while the heavens and the earth still stand, sacrifices have passed away, and kingdoms and prophecies among those who are born of women, and such like as not being ordinances of Elohim. Hence, therefore, he says, every plant which the Heavenly Father has not planted will be rooted up. So then this again lines up with what the prophets are saying, what Yeshua said, what the testimony of the Ebionites are. It all lines up to say that the sacrifices were not part of the original Torah. And finally, this reference to the original gospel, the gospel which our Greek version of Matthew is based upon. In the Ebionite so-called gospel, it says, "I came to abolish the sacrifices, and if you cease not from sacrificing, wrath will not cease from you." So this gospel he's speaking about is something that you could almost say is the legendary gospel. It's only mentioned by historians, and it's quoted by, just bits and pieces are quoted in different books by like Origen and Jerome. And it's known as the Gospel of the Ebionites, or the Gospel according to the Hebrews. It's the original Hebrew gospel that we don't have anymore. And according to it, Yeshua said that he came to abolish the sacrifices. So when he said to make the offering that Moshe commanded, we don't know exactly what it is now, but we certainly know it wasn't a blood sacrifice, because Yeshua and other places taught specifically against it. And keep in mind, this incident that we're talking about, it occurred after the Sermon on the Mount, when Yeshua's going through the land of Israel, and he's got crowds of people following him, and then this man with leprosy approaches him and asks for cleansing. So Yeshua was teaching, and he was instructing the people, and he was certainly instructing the people about the falsehoods in the Torah. The man who he healed would have understood what he meant when he said, "Go and make the offering that Moshe commanded." He didn't say, "Go and make a sacrifice." In the same way that we've ended the previous videos, I want to repeat this admonition from Kepha. He said, "When I'll teach the things that pertain to salvation, and anyone refuses to receive them and strives to resist them with a mind occupied by evil opinions, he will have the cause of his perishing not from us, but from himself." So it's very important to accept the testimony of Kepha. Today we read this, that impious men, overlooking the multitudes that are spoken in the Scriptures for Elohim, and looking at those that are spoken against him, gladly bring these forward, and thus the hearers, by reason of ignorance, believing the things against Elohim, become outcasts from his kingdom. So I would just urge you to be very careful with trying to bring these Scriptures forward and say that, oh, well, there's this other passage here or there that supports the mainline Orthodox view, when we have the testimony from Yeshua. We have the testimony from his chief apostle, Kepha. So if you want to cling to the doctrine of the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees, then by all means that's your decision, but I would strongly caution against it. And finally, Matthew 16:19, where Yeshua gives Kepha the keys to the kingdom and says, "Whatever you bind on earth is bound in the heavens." So whatever Kepha's teaching, Yeshua, the prophet of truth, who knew everything, the end from the beginning, had all knowledge, said that we have to mind the words of Kepha, because he's the one that has the keys to the kingdom. And if Kepha says something, it is bound in heaven. So I thank you for listening. I pray that this has been a blessing to you. Shabbat Shalom. Good day.